for it. We'll say to everyone, when I do public speaking, I was always told never apologize. However, I do have to apologize. I'm a bit croaky and I might be coughing a bit just because I'm recovering from sickness. So yeah, there's a time to break every single rule. I do sound a bit husky, which I don't mind that, but cool. So let's see if this works. So yeah, hello everyone. Hope you've had a good lunch. Just there's a fair few of you here. Sort of first activity, if you want to do, just put in the chat just your current role and sort of the background that got you to prototyping. Hooray, a typo. We know that people have come through that to prototyping from computer programming, graphic design, all sorts of things. So just a bit of a starting point. And let's see if I can find the chat. There we go. And this is where I also end up being a bit of a noob. I haven't been using Zoom that much as of late. So I guess everyone let me know if anyone's come through with any note. Oh, there we go. Yeah, interaction design of front-end dev accessibility, if you can. I think people are still eating their lunch. Multimedia CD. We'll come to you in a bit. Yeah, there's a yay, Michael. Yes, I've been following your stuff. Here we go. Yeah, cool. Hooray. Yeah, happy to see a few people from different backgrounds. I'll come back and have a look at this as we go. So yeah, welcome to the workshop. This workshop's going to have about four parts to it, 2 parts, hopefully a very brief break. And then sort of the first part is going to be a bit about sort of approach to to doing prototyping in a sort of a more intermediate way. Then there's the break. And for those of you, then it's going to get into sort of the nerdy stuff to do with the prototype kit and nunchucks, and then a recap and questions. So yeah, first of all, just going a bit about my approach. So some of you may know me, but I don't know if I ever speak that much about my actual background. So yeah, as Emma said, currently user experience design and research lead here at the Student Loans Company. I've been using the GOV.UK prototype kit for a while. This was a blog post that I did in 2020. I've sort of updated it in 2024. And I think some of this workshop was done because of people prodding me saying, please, can you do some videos? Please, can you do sessions? And I don't like making videos. I am using some a little bit later, but the design system day seemed like a great opportunity to finally do that. I am a design nerd, so this is just when I moved to the UK in 2010. I have a vivid memory of going to the design museum back when it was in Chad Thames. I never know how to say it. And every few years I try to go back. So I think this was from this year, just around the time of GovCamp. So yeah, I do love design, and I'll probably go into a little bit about how I've sort of my whole lifetime sort of to do with design sort of maybe informs the way I do things. And yeah, that sort of background that I was talking about. So I was back in New Zealand last year and went and was able to take photos from like my scrapbooks that my mum and I made when I was a kid. I think I was quite lucky. I got to experience design very, very young. As for all these clippings, I do have a talk in me about everything I learned about design. I learned from winning culinary competitions, and always figuring out what was required. Also got to do things at school to do with teaching myself computer-aided design and doing quite well in sort of public competitions. So yeah, I was quite lucky. I just had the opportunity to realize I cared a lot about design very young. And you can also see on the bottom left my portfolio made in Microsoft Word. I didn't know better at the time. And I think like a few of you have seen in the audience, there are a few people of us that did actually go into design training. So this was again in New Zealand. I did a Bachelor of Product Design. So when product design's super cool, I can get to say I was doing it well before it was a thing. And what was interesting about that though was I was able to go and look at what we studied. And the thing that came across when I looked back at that curricula from 20 years ago was there was a real emphasis at the beginning on drawing and sketching and understanding context and understanding history. Call that to the last design systems day. And then once understanding how to communicate ideas and so on, then moving into later things about computer-aided design, technology, and so on. So you're really starting with this, you've got to be comfortable with drawing and sketching, and then you go into using tools in a particular way. These are some of the examples that I managed to dig out from those days. So I don't know if I've seen any. I've seen a few makers around here. I'm not sure if I've seen any actual proper product or industrial designers around, but doing things to do with doing things with 3D design. It looks like I can't get the video working. That's going to cause a bit of an issue later if I can't get that working. We'll have to look at that in the break. But something which I think I learned from doing things such as computer-aided design was it wasn't just about designing things, it was actually thinking about how do you set things up in a particular way that you can change things or you can explore things. So the video showing here is how do you take a pram and then you blow it apart and show that it can be reconfigured. Doing that sort of thing involves sort of thinking about your setup so that you don't try and move things around and it all falls apart. And we saw that happen a lot in design school. And then the other thing which we got with this was Flash. Is there anyone in the audience? I think the multimedia person might have remember this. Anyone here that remembers Macromedia Flash? Yeah, I can see Steve. Yes, this was amazing. Oh, yay! Yeah, and if you want to be proper, before it was Adobe Flash, it was Macromedia Flash. Hated Flash. Oh, Flash intros. Yes, there was some things that were done in a slightly not great way. But for me, I just, through doing product design, I discovered interactive media. I did get to do a great project to do with how could you make music more approachable to people, and taught myself Flash, figured out how to make it all work. It was a lot about just learning how to be creative with the material, but also figuring out how to change things. I'm not going to play this. It is quite cute. The thing which I had was there were different stones and different colors, and you could change settings and it would play different sounds. But I realized playing it back, it's kind of that tinny MIDI sound. You don't want that on an afternoon. But when we share the slides, you can have a look at it. I did find a Flash emulator. I didn't think I would ever be able to play this again. And I was so excited when I was doing the prep for this that I found it in the weekend. Yes, action script, all of these things. Oh, you hated Flash. Flash, like any tool, Flash was used in very awful ways, but as a tool for creativity and doing certain things, it certainly could be amazing. So yeah, I get where everyone's coming from. And yeah, Director, you are better than me. I tried Director, that was beyond me. And oh, it does work. Oh, I'm gonna try and see if we can push it through. This might make. Oh, we're not hearing the sounds. That's cool. I feel a bit better. So yeah, fast forward to a few years. Sort of moved, I still did a bit more sort of 3D design. You can see an example at the top left with research project. We were making toys where it was a bit like the ecosystem. So the shark could eat the dolphin, could eat the octopus. It was all quite good fun. But then a lot more stuff here in the UK that some of you might recognize, things such as council websites, pension websites, fast moving consumer goods, and a bit of moving into, oh, you could hear it. Okay, I can't hear it. Sorry. It was probably a bit jarring on the ears. Yeah, you're all awake now. And it was starting to move a bit into government sort of work. And then more recently, the last sort of since 2016, so what, the last 8 years, doing a lot more in government. So, a few examples here of a tax service, a couple of tax services, internal systems, just a whole load of things to do with differing complexity and all of the GOV.UK prototype kit of the dolphin and a shark and a few other things. What this means to me as a designer today, there is a point. This isn't just me showing off the design portfolio. I think there's a lot about that design journeys must still start from zoomed out and easy to manipulate sketching. There was a reason for us at design school. They literally would not let us use a computer for the first, I think, 6 months to a year. They said you've got to be able to communicate things. And I still do have examples of that from fairly recent times. So example, on the left, like a whiteboard, we were just doing things with stickies and figuring out the journeys. A more recent one where I was just on train, and doing, using lined paper. One good trick, which I got taught from industrial design, was just doing some lines and then just adding a little bit of color to make it pop. That was, if you want one trick from an industrial designer, that was the one that I found quite useful. However, going beyond that sort of sketching over, there are ways to then balance consistency, not having to manually change things all the time, and flexibility, being able to make big changes as required. Yeah, I'm seeing stuff about Pantone pens. Yes, they love them. They love the smell. Didn't need design students, just, they're in their own happy world because of those sweet, sweet chemicals. And when it comes to consistency, the bigger the service, the more some internal consistency helps. The first sort of design project I ended up on in government was this, the inheritance tax estate report. Not actually a thing anymore. It got changed to a checker, though a lot of the screens are still there, familiar. However, when I got this, it was about 180 screens, of which 6 are in a prototype, and that was a real incentive to figure out how to make templates and make things consistent, because doing something such as changing the name of the service or changing the name of some of the navigation, it was just going to have huge knock-on effects that really didn't want to have to think about. So I've spoken a little bit about how I get to where I am, don't jump into optimizing things straight away, and then I'll start to show you about sort of the process which I use to think about how to make a prototype more reusable. And I do have a live example, and the code will be available. I'll actually give you a chance to sort of get to it in the break. So it's inspired by the reported goose citing service, which I think was done by the MOJ folk. Yeah, and I'll share the stuff in a bit. It does use a few templates which are in the gov.uk prototype kit: question template, check answers, guide, a general layout with some custom CSS, and it uses a whole load of components. I'm not going to go into those details today. I'll just sort of hopefully just going on the assumption that you sort of know that there are those things there. And so now I know I have to wait because there's a delay. I'm going to see if I can get this to work. There we go. Right. So this is how we're going to go, by the way, today. I've got a lot of recorded videos just to make these better. So this is an example which I've mocked up. It's a flow of a few screens, which hopefully will feel familiar to you as a group. So an example of someone's gone on gov.uk and they're on a browse page and they want to then go to wildlife. There's a list of things, choosing report an animal sighting. Here is a guide with a few different sections in it. This is actually all on gov.uk more or less. So this is a section again with there's different ways to navigate. And then finally, at the end, there is a new page, which is not real, report a goose sighting with a button. So now we're into a form. Do you like geese? Yes and no. What type of goose was it? And that's probably not a thing. Whoops. When did you see the goose? This is the date field. General check your answers page, playing back things such as the date, and then accept and send, and your details sort of there. So yeah, sort of it's fairly simple flow, but hopefully just gives enough complexity for you to think about different things. So this is sort of the series of pages that that you've seen today, and at this point, so when I do things like this, I look at the journeys to figure out where there are places where things are the same. We want to just find ways to make them reusable. Where there are things that are mostly the same, scenarios where you're like, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be there, and then one time it isn't. Things which are repeatable, and we like it's a little element that want to sort of we always want to be able to transform it in a particular way, or we just want to show it lots of times, or just acknowledging where there are areas where it's a complete free for all. We have no idea from page to page, screen to screen, it could be completely different. And so with that, we are going to try an activity. So hopefully everyone is around someone. So just as an exercise here, I've got a Padlet. On this, we're on the Padlet, we've got some of the sections, and there's some activities in there to sort of just have a think about, like, based on those screens, what would be the same, what would be different, what would your sort of rationale be for deciding how you want to optimize it. I do have it open. And Imran, I think this was one we were suggesting if we could set up a series of rooms and just let people then go and have a look at a particular section. So yeah, I'll give you sort of 10 minutes. I will sort of be keeping an eye on things. And then when you come back, if you've got any thoughts, you can just put them in the chat and we'll have a look at it. You can put the link in the chat. It's a good, so have we got them? Actually, I'll try and so this is the link. Yeah, that's not gonna help me.
I just realised I'm on mute. Was there a particular amount of time you wanted people in the rooms, Vicky?
Say, well, actually, I'm going to start with, I was going to say 10 minutes, but let's just maybe try 5 in the room. So, but say with the groups, apologies, I'm going to call my unwell thing as well. With the rooms, it's sort of say like, so there's a task A, B, and C, and for each group, just like pick one of them. So if you're room 1, like, I'll put this in the notes, like, task A, 1B6. I think you get room numbers, don't you?
Yeah.
2, 5, 7. And
Yeah, there's
C.
quite a lot of people, so there will be 25 breakout rooms.
Oh my goodness. Right. 3, right, so I could do the 3, 7, 10. I don't want to do so. I'm gonna 1, 3, 6. So I'd say with the rooms, every single, it's if you're 1, 3, 6, and so on. Basically, I'm gonna put this in the chat. Always do the rooms, and I haven't finished it, but basically everyone, if you just choose in a group to choose one of the tasks to look at, which is like A, B, or C, just leave D. And it's sort of the rule of like cycle it down, like if you're 1, 3, 6, 9, 12, but also it doesn't really matter. Even as a group, just pick one task that you want to have a look at and have a think about what you what you would do.
Okay. Imran, sorry, I've missed. How do you know which group you're in? How do you get into the room?
I'm going to create the breakout rooms now.
Okay, great.
And based on which breakout room you are in, it'll say, breakout 1, breakout 2. You've been assigned to one of the Padlet sections, A, B, or C, as you can see in the chat. So I'm going to create those rooms now, and I'll pull people back in 5 minutes' time. Okay. Open all rooms.
Yeah, I
Should
think I've
get
done the numbers wrong.
Okay. I've done 25 rooms and 6 to 7 per room, which is
Can we send something to all of the rooms? I never remember what the deal is with it.
yes, I can. I can broadcast if you would like me to.
Because I think let me do a proper note to figure out the breakout rooms. 1, 2, let's just do this. You said there's 25. 1, 2, let's just do it a different way. 1, 2, 8, 9 to 16, 17 to 25. This makes life easier. There we go. Hopefully that will make it easier for the
You can broadcast voice, actually. I've never done that.
Oh, that sounds a bit like the voice stuff.
Big Brother is watching you.
Yes, so the flight sort of was in an airport lounge, thought it was doing. Yeah, I do have the chat open, so we can have a look. We can have that open. What people? Oh. I do really like Padlet.
I'm glad it's working for you.
Yeah, I know. It's not mural, but yeah, it's still what I mean is it was yeah, there's some quite fun stuff to do with like pushing people to particular sections, but we're
Imran,
not doing that today.
Imran, the room that you put me in, there's one other participant in that room, livid.
Okay, that's fine. Which room was it? Oh, Gordon's kind of isolated as well. Let me just move some people around. It's based on who's joined and who hasn't, so
Yeah, it's actually got, there are 37 participants at the minute.
there's 3 people in that. Okay. Some rooms look like they're doing okay. Sorry, which room was it again?
Livid, it looked like. L-I-VID or something like that.
Yeah, well, I think they're numbered, so
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's what it looked like. I don't know. I couldn't really read it.
oh yeah, room 23. So there's someone in room 23 who's so I'll move them into room 22. That's cool. Katrina, I'll move you into another room as well. Where shall I add you to room 19? If that's okay.
Well, it's fun. I can see it's fun. I'm seeing people making notes and stuff on the sections. So.
Cool.
What time did you start, Vicky?
1:15.
150.
Oh,
I get it. It originally said 1:30 somewhere else.
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry. This is
that's all right. So I
this
just
is
want to
my
say I'm
bad.
sorry I'm late. No, don't worry about it. That's why I was late, because I was like, oh,
Yeah, no.
off quickly.
Everything's in slides more or less. So
Yeah.
I think this is being recorded.
Sorry.
No, I was quite relieved there's an extra 15 minutes because I thought this was going to be tight.
Yeah, and I thought people would benefit from a break after this as well.
Yeah.
With it being a
Oh,
longer
someone doesn't have a
session.
room.
Okay, let's have a look. Hi, Natasha. Let's have a look. Right. I think I've assigned everyone that I can. There's only one thing, which is Natasha. I don't know if you've joined via the app or via the web browser, but if you've joined via the web browser, it doesn't always allow me to place you into breakout rooms. So we can create a room here, maybe, and use this as a breakout room, the main chat. That would probably be a useful use of this space for people who do not have the Zoom app. If we consider this breakout room number 26, then instead of 25, we can go into group C, I think, and joining.
Okay, great. Thanks. How are we doing with time? I can see people are moving, like making notes and stuff like that, which is
Yeah,
and let's be
it's
honest, this is very much just to like letting people. This is just interactive, just to let people think more than anything.
yeah, I've just got a notification that the time is up and it's asking me if I want to close them now. Shall I close them and bring people back?
Yeah, let's do it. I think it's just like letting them, isn't it? This is basically just letting them have a think more than anything. It's like you're here to participate. Hello, folks. So yeah, we're slowly being brought back. Where it's a bit of a whistle stop thing, but yeah, sorry, not sorry. You can have a look at it later as well. It's hopefully just a chance to at least have a think about how you might approach starting to make things more reusable. If anyone's got any particular thoughts about like the activity or anything like that, you feel free to put them in the chat. Oh, that's me having done my alarm as well.
Yeah, there's just 8 seconds left till it'll
Yeah, about the
auto.
optimization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a fair thing. It's where this is the one about where is it worth trying to make things more consistent and where is it not? You know, where is it valuable and where isn't it? 'Cause it's not always where it's valuable. But yeah, it's a fair comment, Richard. Oh, so maybe while people are putting things in, actually, I can control this again, can't I? Yeah, only just long enough.
Could have done with 10 more minutes there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fair enough. I think this is one where yeah, next this is the when I've done my timings, I realized if I spend could be a really good activity, but probably not in an hour and a half with other things. So I will talk through some of the things which I thought about when I was looking at these screens, and I'm interested to see if this sort of resonates with you. So the couple of examples that we had at the beginning of the journey, to do with the browse page and the topics page. We look here on the left, there's a example of text, and but the style is repeating, you know, it's pretty much the same. There's 5 examples, and they're all just going to be styled in exactly the same way. And similarly with the topics page, there is an element, which is this sort of like card, and that's pretty much the same all across the board, but the text and the link changes for each different example. Going on to the guide, and I'm going to have a look with the I'm just looking through the notes that people have put with some of these things. Yeah, I can see people said examples of cards and all the like. This is the example to do with the guide, like where we might make things sort of reusable. I've actually put the name of the title, like the page title and the guide title on the page as well, because it's something else to think about. So on this example, you know, there are some things which are always exactly the same. It's always gov.uk. Across all of the pages, sort of the things to do with the header and the breadcrumbs and the overall title of the guide and the information on the right-hand side. That's pretty much the same across every single page, you know, in this guide. There's some bits which change ever so slightly. So for example, the table of contents, it's the same links, but on a particular section. The current page doesn't have a link. There's also some quirky things with the guide. It's a next and a previous page, but if it's the first page, it doesn't have a previous. If it's the last page, it doesn't have another. And then in the middle, this sort of content that completely changes across every single page. You know, the details to do with the if it's like this example of reporting a stranded whale or dolphin. The other thing I would mention actually is the 3 examples. This title, report a stranded whale or dolphin, that's used 3 times on this page. It's used in the title. It's very cool. It's this is definitely a sort of a first pass of these things. There's an example, it's a title, but it's also in the table of contents, and it's also the start of this page. So it's one title which is reused 3 times. Going on to the examples to do with the form. Similar thing here. A lot of that doesn't really change. Sort of the background, the fact it's the gov.uk header and so on. We've got another example of this service name. That's going to stay fairly consistent across the entire form. There is this title, which is always going to change on that for every single page that is used in more than one place. And again, that's for accessibility. The actual stuff in the form field, that's going to change for every single example. But there's little bits that sometimes mostly change, but don't. And this is the example about the back button. It's most of the time it's there, but if we see one of the later examples, it's hidden on the check your answers page. So, sometimes there are elements that 90% of the time they're there, but sometimes they're not. Another one about, I was talking about where things where you might want to change things. This is a common example. You ask for the month of the year, and then we want to play it back as in text. So instead of it being 1, we want to make it January. This can also be useful for other things to do with headers and formatting. It's the data doesn't change, but it's just how you present it. And this sort of stuff is, really helpful for doing user research. So with this, looking at the structure of the screens in your service and how things vary helps you think about the underlying logic of your prototypes. I also think it is quite a good test. If things are changing quite a lot, like if your head is on the right-hand side, yeah, it shows us like the form is 114. It does, I find it's quite useful to think, for example, if things are changing a lot, say on the right-hand side of the page, you think, is that good? Does it mean that we're putting too much stuff there that people might not find, that people might miss? It's just a really good example about thinking about the logic and how you set up your screens. And then finally, I didn't get you as a team to think about an example about, is there something that you would want to just make consistent across the entire journey? There is some stuff which I'll come into later with how you do versioning, like how you make sure that you can do something, have a brainwave, like a completely different version, and still have that old version as a reference. So there is stuff to do with sometimes making things, setting things up so that you can make huge changes, but still have that history there. And so with that, having sent you through a little bit of a whirlwind of like an activity, I will give you 5 minutes if you want to come back at 5 to 2. But this is also a point if any people are curious about code or even going back and looking at the previous evaluation example. So the work which I am going to be showing you is on GitHub. So if people want to go and have a snoop in the 5 minutes, they can. But also if they do want to just go back and look at the Padlet, based on what we've been talking about, you're welcome to do it as well. So I'll give you, or just have a cup of tea or anything. So if you come back at 13:55 and we'll continue, and it will be a lot of sort of talking through videos at this from now on.
Okay, fantastic. 5-minute break. I am going to run and get an emergency cup of tea.
Vicky, hi.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry to interrupt when you're probably having a bit of a rest there. I haven't used GitHub before, so I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing here.
It's more just if people want to download the, so yeah, you don't have to do anything. It's more that if people want to see the code, this is a bit like a tutorial example. So that's just, it is optional. It's, yeah,
Okay.
it's, you don't have to do anything. You can sit back and relax. It's more just some people like, show me the code. I want to play with it.
Yeah, I need to learn. Thanks, Vicky. Your session's great. I'm really enjoying it so far. So thanks for that.
It might get a bit nerdy quite soon. So you need to hold that thought.
Honestly, I'm so in. Thanks.
Any folk who do have to step away with this, you will get the slides. It does have all the videos and links in it. It will miss the commentary because I was not prepared to listen back to myself on videos. But other than that, there should be a lot that you can work through afterwards. So we're on 13:55. So I am going to continue on. Or I might wait until I'm going to go. Emran's back on. I'm going to continue without him. Future date for past event. Yeah, there's a whole load of stuff. I'm seeing a note in the chat about like future dates and past dates. That's a whole extra thing about how much you optimize your prototypes. In the past, we have done stuff to do with error messages and how you do all that sort of stuff. It is possible. It'll just come to this thing that we talk about later to do with the effort versus the value and so on. It is a good question. We have sometimes done prototypes where we've not let people put in certain dates if we wanted to test. Oh, right. So this is getting into the bit with coding. At the moment. One thing I do want to make super clear, this is just the way one person does it. There's certainly a whole group of us across sort of prototype kit people, and it's kind of entertaining. We joke that we all do things in different ways. I know Adam Silver's, I think I've seen here in the chat, he does things in particular ways. I think there's Ed, Joe, there's a whole lot of people that do things in different ways, and that's completely fine. Feel free to go and look at them. If anything, that's part of the joy of people learning a craft. Hello, Adam. So at the risk of doing that annoying thing of telling you to do something important before actually doing the thing, one of the most important things, which, and I think this comes back to my sort of some of the stuff to do with computer-aided design, is if you're going to be making changes, the worst thing is making a change and breaking stuff or changing things and you don't quite know what's happened. So a trick which I picked up from Craig Abbott, who was head of accessibility at DWP and now at Elastic, was a lovely little trick for being able to check what's being saved in your prototype from a data perspective, what's going on, just helping with that debugging. And this is going to be the first ones on the screens, videos, to see how this works. So I'm going to try. So I'm just going to give you examples about showing how some of the code works, how this works, but also there's following screens which actually have this if you want to copy it. So the example we have here is if you're looking at a page and, say if we go and put in some input, do you like geese? Yes, put in information. And there can be examples where if we go to the check answers page or something, it might not work and we don't know why. So I'm pasting in some code in the roots.js file from Craig. And I did a version where I manually typed this. It was painful. So you're going to see the thing. But what's useful about this is now when you look at the page, I can see in the prototype what's been saved. So for example, I can see that there's a data field called geese liked and it's yes. And I think it'll show another example. We're continuing on and, looking at examples such as trying to see what other inputs there. So this one, what type of goose was it? Mallard. It's just really useful for often when you're trying to understand why isn't something showing up, like why is it going on, just setting up those feedback loops helps you be able to check things and, you know, feel comfortable that, you know, that things are working in an expected way. That's the code. Copy it. You know, I'm not going to talk to this. I barely understand it. I know I do understand it, but, you know, not for today. And that's the sort of example that you see in your output in your terminal. So yeah, you haven't designed until you've realized you've screwed something up, and that's why it's not showing up in your prototype. Something else that I do, and this was what I mentioned about having different versions, is finding ways to have different folders and ring fencing them so that I can make huge changes and not worry about it breaking everything. So in this example, I show you this is if you're working through this on your own, I would suggest, you know, take the base version and then you make a version called, say, working or something. And then I think I'm doing examples where I'm changing some of the code, because you can see here that all of the links are linking to final work. Actually, I tell a lie. I'm just updating my index file on this. But in this new folder, I've now got making some changes, but I also have problems in that all of the links are going to the wrong place. You can see there's versions there where I put links and it says base and so on, and that's a bit fragile. So what I do now is I found ways to make it so that when I copy something, it's always going to be scoped to that folder. So you can see there's some stuff here. I'm changing all of the links to say folder. And then I'm going to jump forward because you don't need to see that. I'm going to try to. Maybe I can't. This is the fun of this. I can't skim forward on these videos, I think. But if we put into Roots.js, I'm putting in some extra code, which is going to basically let me, at any point in time, be able to tell the prototype, oh, you're in this folder called working. All of the links, there's going to be a variable called folder. You can link to it from there. Similarly, subfolder. You'll see it in a little bit. It just makes it really useful for having different versions. And I've made a typo and then I fixed it. I'll give this a second. Yeah, it fixes itself. That's the other thing. So people, no matter how long you use it, I often say to junior interaction designers, if you haven't broken your prototype at least 2 times in one day, you're not doing your job. But you can see an example here because I put variables in. If you look, all of the links are then saying like href working guide and such and such. It's just a sort of thing which means that you've got ring fence versions where no matter what you're doing, you're not going to accidentally link off to another part of the prototype. You don't have to worry about things being about making massive changes. And this is an example. Something else which you see in the prototype kit is roots. Don't talk about it here so much today, but that's where if you've got complicated logic things to do, you'll put them in that file. You can similarly put them in that folder, do a load of, and then do all your changes there and not have to worry about it. You know, you do a V1, do a load of stuff, then make a V2. You don't have to worry about it sort of affecting all of the other versions, which I saw a fair amount. And with that, I'm going to try and skip to the next one. There we go. So a lot of code, we can see it in the GitHub file, but just some notes when you're looking through to this with yourself. The stuff which I talked about to do with checking what you're doing. There's something about letting you have different versions without it conflicting with everything else. There's some other stuff which I've added. Sometimes it's useful to be able to check not only like what page you're on, but also where it's come from. Really useful for checking answers, and the example to do with like roots and so on. Twice in 2 minutes here. Yeah, I'm thinking Michael's point. Yeah, we break it all the time. It means you're being comfortable with the material. So this is a sort of example where it gets really useful, making templates. So when I make templates, I can put them in the folder. Like, you know, I might say I want to make a dramatically different caseworking folder, caseworking screen, as you saw from my earlier examples. And I can put that template in that folder, do lots of changes, then make another version, change it completely. And I know that I've got that sort of ring-fenced history that I don't have to worry about it suddenly breaking everything else. So I say this is sort of one, it might sound a bit abstract, but once you start using it, it's really helpful and gives you confidence to make lots of changes, without worrying that you've completely broken every version of your prototype. So I've spoken a bit about just like setting things up, doing things in an organized way. And going back to this thing about where things are the same, mostly the same, repeatable or completely different effects, what sort of coding techniques I use. Do you have the roots file available? Doesn't have all the stuff you showed. Oh, that's the wrong prototype. Sorry. There should be, no wonder it's the wrong one. Example prototypes. You can look at that accessibility one if you want. But it's this one. You see, Joel, I love design so much that I'm doing loads of different versions. And it's the example prototype. Apologies, folks. Just one. Feel free to look around my GitHub. I do have a lot of stuff. There are some various consistency tools and nunchucks which you can use to make things more repeatable. Some simple change, if you want to make simple changes, you can use iterators, macros, and filters. So I already spoke about this example with the page with the A to Z. So with an example like this, you sometimes kind of have the rule of like more than 3. If you have to do something more than 3 times, it's possibly worth thinking about how to make it a bit more consistent. So with an example like this, rather than having lots of, having the same code again and again for this, it's possible to change it and make it into like one iterator, like the idea we know that there's a whole load of stuff which is consistent, and then just like push in a few things which are different. And you'll see in a second. So in this example, I'm now pulling out the things which are different on all of this is each link has a title and it has a link, an href as to where it goes to. So those are things which I need to, those are the things which I'm going to need to sort of be able to tell the code. But there's some stuff which is exactly the same, which is that there is a list and there are list items with particular styling in them. So you can see I'm setting up the styling and then creating what is called a for loop. So I'm going to say there's an object in a list. And I know that it's always going to look the same. It's going to have link with particular styling. And you can see me just sort of saying that I'm going to be telling them about a thing, and each thing's going to have a link, which I'm calling an href, and then also something which has a title. And then I think this is the one I'm saving you some pain. I'm going to showing you something which I prepared earlier. The list. Oh no, you're going to see me doing this manually. So, what I am going to do is I'm going to skip ahead slightly. You can see me just like manually creating this, but your list could also be stuff to do with code and so on. I'm going to skip. Oh, skip ahead. There we go. So I'm going to skip forward because my grand plans of jumping through video isn't working. The concept which I want you to get across with this is if you know that something's going to repeat a lot, so you know that you're going to be showing a list of something 5 or 6 times, you can just create a loop, for something in list, do that repeating stuff, and then create something which then you can pump the information into it. So here I've created a something called list. And in the list, there's always something there's a whole lot of things which have a title and it has an href. So this is then saying for whatever in this list, play back the thing which is called the href and something which has the title. So for things like this, when you start to have really long lists, it just means, for example, if you decided, oh, the padding's a bit weird, I want to make it, I want to make the margin slightly less, or I want to design it in a particularly different way. You've just built up a little bit of the consistency without having to manually change everything. This is probably on the edge of, of whether it would just be easier just to leave it. But I think this is a nice example to just think there's little things that you can do just to make things more consistent. So going on to this example of the macro, which I think, go to the example of the card, which I think some people mentioned could be made repeatable. So in this example, similarly, I will go and look in the code, and you can see there's a whole load of there's a whole load of repeating HTML and CSS. So for those people that look at the GitHub example, there's a lot of custom code here because this isn't normally in the prototype kit because it's gov.uk. So you probably won't have to make macros that much, but they can be useful. So here I have realized there's a little reusable bit of code, which is the list item. I'm going to make a macro called gov.uk card. And you can see the other thing most people have trouble spelling, and I think I've made is a mistake which I end up fixing later. So I understand there's repeatable use of code, which is to do with this sort of list item, which is the macro. There's a whole load of stuff that's going to be exactly the same, so I don't need to touch it. But there's 3 things that need to be different. There's the link, there's the title, and there is the description. So I'm just making those 3 things variables that I can like feed information into it. And then with the macro, I then am just saying, there's a title called something or another, a description called something or another, and a link called something or another. And then once you have that, then you've set up a little repeating element that you can use. So then I think this one you will see me. I do actually save you some time. So yeah, you can see examples here where I've just said, I know that I need these cards, and just with that list, and you can see the example here now because it's come up twice. It's worked perfectly. And then I delete the other stuff. So yeah, you don't have to make macros as much as you used to. Certainly before the task list got made into a macro, we had to do this all the time. But yeah, it's a really powerful thing. There is also, so yeah, you can see some of the examples. There are ways to, if you look in, there are ways to make sure that macros, you can use them on other pages. You can import them. Again, less of a thing, but just something to look up if you're if you know that you want to use this on several pages, there are extra things to help you. I think it's in the sort of Nunjucks guidance. So I spoke a bit about the when don't you optimize. I could have made the browse and A to Z topics a form of template, but I kind of went for 2 pages. It's probably not worth it. Yeah, you don't always need to optimize. Sometimes it's okay just to leave it as is. It seems much more efficient. Do you love a macro? Yes, Adam, team macros. So we spoke a bit about transforming information in a particular way, and this is a filter. And I think Ed, one of the first stuff I know, he loves a filter. I think he puts stuff in filters, which I wouldn't always do. But yeah, coming back to different people do things in a different way. So this is an example. So I'll show you the example here of what it might mean to to take this field and make it a bit smarter. There is some stuff I'm going to show you here, which I think is in the gov.uk prototype kit tutorials that got put in fairly recently. So first example you just see here, date or 31. This is just some nice Nunjuck stuff that if you know that a page would normally have content on it, you can just make it have a default. So if, instead of it showing undefined and whatever, you can show something. I'm just doing that to keep things tidy. Another thing with Nunjucks is if something doesn't work properly, sometimes it's worth putting brackets in. It's a bit like maths. Sometimes if you don't know if some of you might have horrible memories of school of bed maths and all that sort of stuff. But sometimes if things don't seem to be working, it can be because the code is doing something in the wrong order. So you can see here, there's a nice example of like it's a default version. And again, we can actually check and see whether does it still work if we put an example, put real data in there. Yes. Again, check the terminal and we can see that it's saved. But so now we know that it's working, and then we can make it tidier and actually go and add, make sure that it shows up with the month. So this is when we go to filters, and here I've just shown you an example which I've got, which I've pre-created. Again, this idea of you send something to, here there's a macro called monster words, and it's basically taking something like the month, which is a number, and then it's comparing it to something in the list and saying, well, if it's, position 1, then it's going to show January and so on. And so just put it there as a pipe. Data activity monster note template. And this is something which I think of, which is known as Pogue's law. David Pogue from the New York Times. Everyone knows 80% of what you can do with a computer, but it's a different 80%. So you might know something which I don't know. But yeah, so this is just the example of that. It is possible to, filters is a really nice way if you know that you need to do something with a particular thing, with a particular bit of data, but you don't need to, it's just about formatting. You can do it this sort of way. So again, here's an example of the code. And I think, and yeah, showing how it works in practice as well. There's also some examples in the prototype which I've to do with filters for headings and so on. I think, yeah, just the thing that there's a lot you can do with filters if you want to. I would just say, just think about the fact that one thing with filters is it's not like macros or templates or other things. When you do it once in filters, it's going to be there across your whole prototype. So don't, if you realize that you've made a mistake or you need to do it in a different way, it can end up having unexpected effects on your prototype. So I've spoken a bit about sort of the little things. Now, I'm looking more at what does it mean to create a template for lots of things that are going on. So for that example, I will use the sort of what I just call the form field. This is the, the screens to do with the reporting a goose sighting. On this, so we've seen this page before. We've seen the things which we've noted, there's some stuff which is being reused, some stuff which doesn't change. And yeah, some things which change everywhere. So translating that into Nunjak's language, there's things here which can be, for example, that goose sighting name, that could be a variable which is set in the template. The stuff which is unchanged across the pages could be a template which is in that version of a folder. The thing which is usually or not always on, that could be a template variable which is on by default, but you can turn it off. And the detail that changes on every single page is a block. And let's see how I did this on Sunday. So what I do with this is, you can see this new example. When I've worked on a few pages, I can then decide which is the best example to make a template from and just duplicate it and just change it to base.html. It can be called whatever you want. I just make it _b because it shows up at the start. I keep it as HTML because you get the nice color formatting, but there's lots of options. I just find it works for me. And you can see in the examples here, I'm starting to find ways to create variables for the template. So I've decided that every single page will have a page title variable, that's something which I know will change every page. I'm changing with the backlink. I've decided to create a variable called hide back, and it's if not hide back. So it's weird language, but basically it's saying by default, if there is generally it'll show up, but if there is a variable called hide back on the page, it's going to hide. So I'm sort of setting up a way that I can I know that I sometimes want to turn it off, but I don't want to do it most of the time. So I just can set it up like that. And going through the page, a lot of the stuff I kind of want to keep, like I know that every single page, I generally want it to be 2/3. So I'm keeping all of that stuff in. And now I'm making a new block called form. You can call it whatever you want. There's other ways to do stuff with super codes and stuff like that. But what I like about this is at the very least, when I'm looking at my templates, I can remind myself it is a block called form. There's some other stuff around it. And if I've got multiple templates, I don't get too mixed up. So some of the other things which I'm keeping an eye on here is, so I think at this point, the nice thing again about making HTML is you can actually go and then check in the browser, what does it look like? And I'm like, yeah, this kind of looks like what I expect it to. So I haven't broken it, which I do break one of them later. It hasn't done anything really wild on styling. Like it looks like it's in a good state as a base page. So now that I have that, I can now start changing all of my form pages to use that template instead of just the overall one. So here you can see I'm saying just extends working form base.html. So I'm just sort of keeping, now I'm going to use that base page which I just created, changing the block content to say form. I get to delete a whole load of content because I know it doesn't matter. What I love about the code editor I use is it can see that I've deleted some stuff and the code doesn't line up. I do keep the form information, the form field in the form these days because the way that we set up pages, it might not always be a form, or the way that we sometimes have like, we have something where it's a one question, or we have lots of things. I try not to over optimize. But now, so if you see, this looks pretty much just like what you would expect. That's like, doesn't look massively weird, so that's a good sign. I can look at the code and see that it's, it's where I expected. Now, though, to do my hygiene, instead of it just extending for using hard coding, I'm actually going to make it link to the variable folder and subfolder. So that means in the future, if I decide to copy this entire folder and call that working to work at final 1, 2, 3, all of the templates will still work and they won't break. The reason I don't do relative links is there used to be some weird stuff to do with layouts. That might have changed, but this, I prefer this in that it keeps it fairly consistent. So then at this point, I just can go through all of the other pages and see what's going, and then just like, do a whole load of deleting. And this is where it's really powerful from a consistency perspective, because I've deleted all of that stuff. There's so much content here that I don't have to worry about accidentally changing it, or if I change the layout of the page, it's going to be, I'm going to have to change it in 5 or 6 different screens. I think, yeah, and then I end up just going and just copying and pasting and putting some of them in the other areas as well. The other thing when I look at the top, if you mentioned at the very top, if you notice, there's little things like in the browser, you can see it says do you like geese, report a goose sighting, and so on. That's where setting things up really well is helpful for if you want to do testing with people with access needs, or even just like showing the wider team, that the reminder that there is, when we're designing screens, we have to think about things like page titles and so on. So I'm going to stop on that. I will say, if you do watch this, you get to see me make a mistake and then have to fix it. So, when I demo fail. So again, the example. So showing an example in a folder of a base file with all of the, with all of those like common elements, including a few things that I sometimes want to turn off, and then a example of a page where I have, just using information. I have missed an example. There was the example later on, say with the check your answers page. If I wanted to turn off the, like, hide the backlink, I would just have a variable at the top when it says set hide link equals true. So, you can use variables at the very top just to like know when there are things that you want to turn on and off. In fact, this is some of the details which you can see here. It's a lot about like reusing text. Yeah, thinking about how much you want to change. And this is, an example about how this might work on an actual page as well. Again, you can see all this stuff in the code, particularly say looking at examples like check your answers, the confirmation page, you'll see things like the backlink turned off. And finally, this might be one I'll skip through a little bit because this does start to get into kind of the advanced stuff. There are some things which are even more complicated to create, and that in this example is guides. So looking back at this guide example, going back to this thing when we talked about what's the stuff which is the same, what's going to be entirely different, and what are the things that have some sort of like extra conditions that you need to think about. So there's a few things here which will be similar from the forms. So the idea that there's going to be a template and we set everything up, most stuff around there, there's going to be a block. There's going to be this reused title at the top. But there are a few things in this sort of how we deal with the table of contents, and that fact that there's a page, the current page doesn't have a link, and this whole thing to do with like the previous page and the next page, which is sort of, this is getting to another level of complexity. Oh. So this is just going through the reminder about how the guide page works. When you click on certain pages, the current page doesn't show, the link disappears, and so on. So again, you can see the thing which I start. I always take a page that seems useful and just turn it into a base file. And I'm going through and just, again, looking at bits where I know that I can start making variables. So again, there's a thing about a page title, the name of the guide, and so on. This is a reminder that you can, set variables in your template. So you can decide that, this one that the entire guide is going to be called reporter goose sighting. So rather than, so that's something that can be set at that page. Let's put an animal sighting, apologies. To admit, what I think I'm going to do is this was always a long video, and because I can't jump through because of our setup, what I am going to try and do is actually talk through some of the oh, I can see them run. Hey, hooray, someone's moving stuff forward for me.
I can seem to skip forward. Would you like
Yeah,
me to go further?
Yeah. Let me just see. Yeah, this is a good point. Yeah, so this is a really good point now. So as you can see, they've done the previous stuff. And yeah, so now this is pretty standard. We've created like a base, and we can just like the guide stuff is all just completely in there. That's the stuff, the content which is just completely changing all the time. I thought I was being so organized doing a video. Didn't think about not being able to skip through. Again, you're not a designer if you haven't broken your code at least 3 times. So again, you can see the nice things here. You can see how it's the page titles reflecting, what the page looks like, which is just nice discipline. And then I think this is going to be the point where I am just going to end up this at the bottom of the page. There's all of this sort of really complicated stuff to do with. If you're on page 3, you need to say page 4, and you need to say page 2 and all of that. And I think rather than showing the process, what I will do is then just, this is probably for the more advanced audience, people comfortable with this. There is some stuff to do with nunchucks about using loops. So you can actually set things up so that you can, if you know that a page is page 3, it can do some counting and show stuff which is number 2 and number 4. This is sort of complex things with your templating. So here, this you could use loops to go through the list of there are 4 things on this in this guide. Based on what page it is, you can decide if we know we're on page 3, you can show page 2 and page 4 and so on. And examples here about setting up a list of pages deciding what the current page is and so on. And I think see more here to do with the code. So yeah, there are ways, particularly with guides, to make it work. But I will say to this audience, even to this day when I do it, I think the last time when I was doing this for this presentation, I kind of went through it and it took me a bit of head scratching. I kind of got it working. Then I'm already going to ask a developer to explain it exactly. So there are just some things where the other secret trick about stuff with designing and prototyping, sometimes you do something, it's just on the edge of you understanding it. I know that wasn't the case with me with Flash, but yeah, there are fun things to do with like making that guide work properly. Yeah, you can see some of the examples on this page here. Having set it up so that you can say that it's page 1 in a guide and so on. So I have done a bit of a canter through, which I'm conscious is a whistle stop, and probably stuff that people will be wanting to go and digest stuff and have a look at the code and so on. But I'm also haven't run over, so I feel quite happy about that. So I think the main things which I want to just reiterate with this sort of stuff, don't, if you don't know how to do this stuff in the past, don't over optimize. The designer needs to control the prototype, not the other way around. I have seen examples where front-end developers, and maybe front-end developers, think about your power here. Front-end developers sometimes might set up super robust prototypes with the designers, and then the front-end developer disappears and the designers they can't make design choices because they don't feel comfortable with how they can manipulate things. So yeah, it's actually fine to have something which is a little bit hacky, but you can control it. And I think that's showing a lot of these examples here is about still staying in control of the prototype and being able to make changes. Yeah, think computer aided design, not computer controlled design. That was something which went back to my product design days. We were taught to use it as a sketching tool, setting things up so that you're like, oh, it doesn't look nice, I want to make a bigger radius or so on. Just think about using it as a tool to help you get sort of high fidelity results that help you with research and with specifying things for developers. And yeah, smart templating gives us the guardrails to do high quality, flexible design that helps us do the hard work to make things simple. And I've got a typo, to make things simple. So yeah, we are pretty much, we've sort of got a little bit of time left, but yeah, say if there's anything that people have put in here, if you want to sort of put in stuff that you've learned, again, here's the code, not the other prototype which I gave you. I do still the prototyping, but yeah, this is a chance if people want to put in things that they've learned, or if there's things to do with questions. Yeah, happy. I think we've got about 10 minutes left. Anything that you can, I see something from Kim, anything you can do to help with handover between interaction designers when using these more interactive. Steve, yes, comment the code. Completely agree. Steve has nailed it on the head. In fact, when I've been doing this work doing this presentation has been quite useful for me. I've started to have to go and put examples in the code. Yeah, do the commenting. It's can someone else understand it? Even like, what is it? Where did it come from? I've seen hilarious stuff in code. Like, I don't quite understand how this works, but it works. Yeah, just that, just helping people explain what it does is more than important, more than anything. The videos, yes. So these videos are embedded in the presentation and they are available to the public. I know that because everyone's done it. So yeah, that they're all in here. I did make a point of that. Yeah, just again, I know that they don't have audio on them because I was not prepared to do that to myself today. You'll have to look through that sort of stuff. Yeah, and I was trying to think if there's any other just seeing any other comments. Yeah, comments, what have people learned? I think it's just one of these things that, more than anything, I'll just, even now, so join the GOV.UK prototype kit Slack. You'll see there's a whole few of us, and you'll see some of us kind of like building off each other and finding that we can do things in different ways. I've certainly, I think in the last week, looked at something and someone's like, I didn't know you could do that. So, do see this as just, it's all of us sharing our tips and tricks, and we all do things in different ways. But are there any recommendations for someone learning how to learn more about how to make these tweaks? So the Nunjucks documentation is okay. So that's where I started on some of it. It also links out to Ginger, Jinja. It's sort of an underlying thing that it's a build on a build. That's how I started. I would honestly say otherwise, it's good to look at other people's code and ask them how they did stuff. Maybe in room with it, something we were discussing was there's for those various people in government who do things in particular ways, we almost need to do kind of like a show your stuff. Because again, I know there's at least 3 or 4 of us that do things in completely different ways. But you know, they're all tools to get us to do the right thing. So yeah, I think it's playing, looking at other people's stuff, sharing. And I think, yeah, but again, more than anything, it's okay to try and do something and it works and you don't quite understand why, but also if something really doesn't work, you can always just tear it down and just be like, you know what, especially if you get given someone else's prototype. I've seen this quite a lot. People get given another prototype, and if you don't understand it and you can't get help, it's actually okay to start again. How do you balance a complex feature which is accessible for other thing who is not skilled? Good question. I think this is where, to be honest, actually, I think part of the reason I set up the prototypes the way I did is, as you see, what I really like is for all of the bits which are bespoke content, all of those like areas which are the form or the areas which are the guide page, they're completely ring fenced. So it sort of removes a lot of the complexity away from content designers or whomever who do this. But honestly, what I would say with a lot of it, I always say to content designers, like, just go in and do it. I might say, these are the pages you want to do, but I just say, if you break it, I'll break it more than you do. So don't be afraid. Teach other people someone talked about the circle of safety, the idea if you do something locally and then you do a pull request and someone will check it. And even if it doesn't, I think a lot of it is, it's actually teaching people confidence to play. As much as giving them the tools, just giving them permission that even if they break everything, even if they break the Heroku prototype, you can roll it back. It doesn't matter. It's not production code. But I do think there is also a skill with the designers. I actually think this process of having a logical designs, having a logical process for how you set things up. I'd like to think I can explain to someone like everything here is in this template, everything here. Having a logical system is something that you can explain to other people. They might not be skilled, but they can at least understand the process, that this global thing lives in this area and stuff that changes all the time. That's going to be on all the different pages. Oh gosh, yes. I'm looking. There always seems to be stories in government of people doing brilliant, terrifying prototypes that no one else can change. That's the other part. Try and build on some handovers. Also, interaction designers, if you're that person, expect to be be helpful. If you leave a project, at least answer people's questions, which most people do. Yeah.
We've got a hand up from Andy. Did you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, great. Thanks, everyone, and hi, Vicky. Amazing talk. I've only been in government in Home Office for about a month now, so still very new to all this prototyping stuff. But getting my head around this slowly. One of the things that's come up in a project I am currently working on is I'm an interaction designer within the team, and so I've been working through a lot of the forms and structures that service designers has worked through as well. I'm finding there's a point where the prototyping toolkit can't do I don't think it can do certain things. So, for example, quite complex stuff where you're building up multiple instances of an activity assigned to multiple arrangements and so on. So, what's the best way of kind of communicating what you want the prototype to do when you know that the prototyping toolkit isn't able to do that level of, essentially you can't store kind of multiple groups of data sets in a prototype in the stored kind of in the way that it stores data, or if you can, I'm not clever enough to figure it out.
I think what you're talking about is showing different scenarios, and yeah, that's something which we've dealt with. So strictly speaking, there's always a way. I know some people do wild and funky stuff with like session data. I think in like data.js you can set a whole load of things. I actually think the other thing which I've seen and I've done in the past is it's okay to set up lots of different pages, and then you say, this is this scenario. You can actually do quite nice stuff, a bit like what you've seen with me with doing templating, you know, but I think there's something to be said for sometimes if you have to mock up scenarios and you just have that as a link, you know, you're like, this is what this page with the scenario looks like, and it could be completely static, but you know, the joy of sometimes if you have templating, you can then, you know, have have a base template, and then you like the different scenarios, you've built in some of that like consistency. So yeah, I always, for different scenarios, if I know devs need it, I will sometimes create different scenarios with pages, but it is for that purpose, because it's not for, you know, it's not for testing. It's so that people can look at it and it, you know, it does what they, everyone understands what they need to do.
Okay, yeah. So you almost like making that kind of, here's what I designed earlier. Like, so it's all
Yes.
static. It has like the full picture of almost like worst case scenario. If someone put in huge amounts of data, this is how it would work. But you don't necessarily expect them to use prototype. Yeah, I get you now.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, I think someone made the point about like, was it Gareth's point about sometimes you just need to do a prototype to do a hypothesis. Like I worked with a great product manager who he got asked by the customer, like ops team, you know, your prototype is great. It was that super complicated on the inheritance tax. Like, this is great. You know, could you set it up so that we can use it for training? And he said, absolutely not. You know, that's not the purpose of the prototype. So yeah, it's that thing. It's completely fine to make the prototype, just it's being very clear about what the scenario is and not letting it turn into the fake, you know, the version which really should be the sandbox of the real website, but it's easier for you to do it because, like, you know, you're not a developer.
Were there any more questions or comments for Vicky? Just check the chat.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah. Just lots of love for your session, Vicky, which I can completely agree with. So before we wrap up, can we give a round of applause or emoji reactions, whatever you prefer, to Vicky? Thank you so much for gracing us again at Design System Day. I think I just need to have a Vicky slot whenever we run an event.
it ends up being like Jules Holland's always got like one random person who he always has.
But yeah, another stonking session, and thank you so much. We have time for a break. Do follow Vicky at Vicky TNZ on Twitter, and is that your handle on other socials as well?
Yeah, all the things: Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon. Yeah, basically.
Yeah,
pretty much across the board.
Do go and follow her and read her stuff. She's got some great blogs out there as well. We are back at 3 p.m. For our last session before our closing. And it will be Gordon Guthrie, who's a research fellow at Scottish Government. And he's talking about who designs the designers. So yeah, thinking about the system of government. So do come back for that. And please do come back for our closing ceremony at 4, because we've got a special announcement. Cool. I will let everyone get off. Enjoy your break and see you back here at 3 p.m.